chapter 7, Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house. For he built the house of the forest of Lebanon. Its length was 100 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits, on 4 rows of cedar pillars, with cedar beams on the pillars. It was covered with cedar above over the 45 beams that were on the pillars, 15 in a row. There were beams in 3 rows, and a window was facing window in 3 ranks. All the doors and posts were made square with beams, and window was facing window in 3 ranks. He made the whole of pillars. Its length was 50 cubits, and its width 30 cubits, with a porch before them, and pillars and a threshold before them. He made the porch of the throne where he was to judge, even the porch of judgment, and it was covered with cedar from floor to floor. His house where he was to dwell, the other court within the porch, was of the same construction. He made also a house for Pharaoh's daughter, like this porch. All these were of costly stones, even of stone cut according to measure, sawed with saws, inside and outside, even from the foundation to the coping, and so on the outside to the great court. The foundation was of costly stones, even great stones, stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits. Above were costly stones, even cut stone, according to measure, and cedar wood. The great court around had 3 courses of cut stone with a course of cedar beams, like the inner court of Yahweh's house and the porch of the house. King Solomon sent and brought Hiram out of Tyre. He was the son of a widow of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in bronze, and he was filled with wisdom and understanding and skill to work all works in bronze. He came to King Solomon and performed all his work, for he fashioned the 2 pillars of bronze, 18 cubits high apiece, and a line of 12 cubits encircled either of them. He made 2 capitals of molten bronze to set on the tops of the pillars. The height of the one capital was 5 cubits, and the height of the other capital was 5 cubits. Here were nets of checker work and wreaths of chain work for the capitals which were on the top of the pillars, 7 for the one capital, and 7 for the other capital. So he made the pillars, and there were 2 rows of pomegranates around the one network to cover the capitals that were on the top of the pillars, and he did so for the other capital. The capitals that were on the top of the pillars in the porch were of lily work, 4 cubits. There were capitals above also on the 2 pillars, close by the belly which was beside the network. There were 200 pomegranates in rows around the other capital. He set up the pillars at the porch of the temple. He set up the right pillar and called its name Jachin, and he set up the left pillar and called its name Bowls. On the tops of the pillars was lily work, so the work of the pillars was finished. He made the molten sea 10 cubits from brim to brim, round in shape. Its height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits encircled it. Under its brim around there were buds which encircled it for 10 cubits. Encircling the sea, the buds were in 2 rows, cast when it was cast. It stood on 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, and 3 looking toward the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east, and the sea was set on them above, and all their hindquarters were inward. It was a hand-width thick. Its brim was worked like the brim of a cup, like the flower of a lily. It held 2,000 bats. He made the 10 bases of bronze. The length of one base was 4 cubits its width, and 3 cubits its height. The work of the bases was like this. They had panels, and there were panels between the ledges. And on the panels that were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubim. And on the ledges there was a pedestal above. And beneath the lions and oxen were wreaths of hanging work. Every base had 4 bronze wheels and axles of bronze, and its 4 feet had supports. The supports were cast beneath the basin, with wreaths at the side of each. Its opening within the capital and above was a cubit. Its opening was round like the work of a pedestal, a cubit and a half, and also on its opening were engravings, and their panels were square, not round. The 4 wheels were underneath the panels, and the axles of the wheels were in the base. The height of a wheel was a cubit and half a cubit. The work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Their axles, their rims, their spokes, and their hubs were all of cast metal. There were 4 supports at the 4 corners of each base. Its supports were of the base itself. In the top of the base there was a round band half a cubit high, and on the top of the base its supports and its panels were the same. On the plates of its supports and on its panels he engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees, each in its space, with wreaths all around. He made the 10 bases in this way. All of them had 1 casting, 1 measure, and 1 form. He made 10 basins of bronze. 1 basin contained 40 baths. Every basin measured 4 cubits. 1 basin was on every one of the 10 bases. He set the bases, 5 on the right side of the house and 5 on the left side of the house. He set the sea on the right side of the house eastward and toward the south. Hiram made the pots, the shovels, and the basins. So Hiram finished doing all the work that he worked for King Solomon in Yahweh's house. The 2 pillars, the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on the top of the pillars, the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on the top of the pillars, the 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals that were on the pillars, the 10 bases, the 10 basins on the bases, the 1 sea, the 12 oxen under the sea, the pots, the shovels, and the basins. All of these vessels, which Hiram made for King Solomon in Yahweh's house, were of burnished bronze. The king cast them in the plain of the Jordan, in the clay ground between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon left all the vessels unweighed, because there were so many of them. The weight of the bronze could not be determined. Solomon made all the vessels that were in Yahweh's house, the golden altar and the table that the showbread was on, of gold. And the lampstands, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, in front of the inner sanctuary, of pure gold. And the flowers, the lamps, and the tongs of gold, the cups, the snuffers, the basins, the spoons, and the fire pans of pure gold, and the hinges, both for the doors of the inner house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the house of the temple of gold. Thus all the work that King Solomon did in Yahweh's house was finished. Solomon brought in the things which David his father had dedicated, the silver, the gold, and the vessels, and put them in the treasuries of Yahweh's house. 1 Kings chapter 8. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel with all the heads of the tribes, the princes of the fathers' households of the children of Israel, to King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of Yahweh's covenant out of David's city, which is Zion. All the men of Israel assembled themselves to King Solomon at the feast in the month Etanim, which is the 7th month. All the elders of Israel came, and the priests picked up the ark. They brought up Yahweh's ark, the tent of meeting, and all the holy vessels that were in the tent. The priests and the Levites brought these up. King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel, who were assembled to him, were with him before the ark, sacrificing sheep and cattle that could not be counted or numbered for multitude. The priests brought in the ark of Yahweh's covenant to its place, and to the inner sanctuary of the house, to the most holy place, even under the cherubim's wings. For the cherubim spread their wings out over the face of the ark, and the cherubim covered the ark and its poles above. The poles were so long that the ends of the poles were seen from the holy place before the inner sanctuary, but they were not seen outside. They are there to this day. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 stone tablets which Moses put there at Horeb, when Yahweh made a covenant with the children of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt. It came to pass, when the priests had come out of the holy place, that the cloud filled Yahweh's house, so that the priests could not stand to minister by reason of the cloud, for Yahweh's glory filled Yahweh's house. Then Solomon said, Yahweh has said that he would dwell in the thick darkness. I have surely built you a house of habitation, a place for you to dwell in forever. The king turned his face around and blessed all the assembly of Israel, and all the assembly of Israel stood. He said, Blessed is Yahweh, the God of Israel, who spoke with his mouth to David your father, and has with his hand fulfilled it, saying, Since the day that I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I chose no city out of all the tribes of Israel to build a house, that my name might be there, but I chose David to be over my people Israel. Now it was in the heart of David my father to build a house for the name of Yahweh, the God of Israel. But Yahweh said to David my father, Whereas it was in your heart to build a house for my name, you did well that it was in your heart. Nevertheless, you shall not build the house, but your son who shall come out of your body, he shall build the house for my name. Yahweh has established his word that he spoke, for I have risen up in the place of David my father, and I sit on the throne of Israel, as Yahweh promised, and have built the house for the name of Yahweh, the God of Israel. There I have set a place for the ark, and which is Yahweh's covenant, which he made with our fathers when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. Solomon stood before Yahweh's altar in the presence of all the assembly of Israel, and spread out his hands toward heaven. And he said, Yahweh, the God of Israel, there is no God like you, in heaven above or on earth beneath, who keeps covenant and loving kindness with your servants who walk before you with all their heart, who has kept with your servant David my father that which you promised him. Yes, you spoke with your mouth, and have fulfilled it with your hand, as it is today. Now therefore may Yahweh, the God of Israel, keep with your servant David my father that which you have promised him, saying, There shall not fail from you a man in my sight to sit on the throne of Israel, if only your children take heed to their way, to walk before me as you have walked before me. Now therefore, God of Israel, please let your word be verified, which you spoke to your servant David my father. But will God in very deep dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the heaven of heavens can't contain you, how much less this house that I have built. Yet have respect for the prayer of your servant and for his supplication, Yahweh my God, to listen to the cry and to the prayer which your servant prays before you today, that your eyes may be open toward this house night and day, even toward the place of which you have said, My name shall be there, to listen to the prayer which your servant prays toward this place. Listen to the supplication of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place. Yes, here in heaven, your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive if a man sins against his neighbor, and an oath is laid on him to cause him to swear, and he comes and swears before your altar in this house, then hear in heaven and act and judge your servants, condemning the wicked to bring his way on his own head, and justifying the righteous to give him according to his righteousness. When your people Israel are struck down before the enemy because they have sinned against you, if they turn again to you and confess your name, and pray and make supplication to you in this house, then hear in heaven and forgive the sin of your people Israel, and bring them again to the land which you gave to their fathers. When the sky is shut up and there is no rain because they have sinned against you, if they pray toward this place and confess your name, and turn from their sin when you afflict them, then hear in heaven and forgive the sin of your servants and of your people Israel, when you teach them the good way in which they should walk, and send rain on your land which you have given to your people for an inheritance. If there is famine in the land, if there is pestilence, if there is blight, mildew, locust, or caterpillar, if their enemy besieges them in the land of their cities, whatever plague, whatever sickness there is, whatever prayer and supplication is made by any man or by all your people Israel, who shall each know the plague of his own heart, and spread out his hands toward this house, then hear in heaven your dwelling place, and forgive and act and give to every man according to all his ways, whose heart you know, that they may fear you all the days that they live in the land which you gave to our fathers. Moreover, concerning the foreigner who is not of your people Israel, when he comes out of a far country for your name's sake, when he comes and prays toward this house, hear in heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all that the foreigner calls to you for, that all the peoples of the earth may know your name, to fear you as do your people Israel, and that they may know that this house which I have built is called by your name. If your people go out to battle against their enemy, by whatever way you shall send them, and they pray to Yahweh toward the city which you have chosen, and toward the house which I have built for your name, then hear in heaven their prayer and their supplication, and maintain their cause. If they sin against you, and you are angry with them, and deliver them to the enemy, so that they carry them away captive to the land of the enemy, far off or near, yet if they repent in the land where they are carried captive, and turn again, and make supplication to you in the land of those who carried them captive, saying, we have sinned and have done perversely, we have dealt wickedly. If they return to you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their enemies who carried them captive, and pray to you toward their land which you gave to their fathers, the city which you have chosen and the house which I have built for your name, then hear their prayer and their supplication in heaven, your dwelling place, and maintain their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you, and all their transgressions in which they have transgressed against you, and give them compassion before those who carried them captive, that they may have compassion on them, that your eyes may be open to the supplication of your servant and to the supplication of your people Israel, to listen to them whenever they cry to you. For you separated them from among all the peoples of the earth to be your inheritance, as you spoke by Moses your servant, when you brought our fathers out of Egypt, Lord Yahweh. It was so that when Solomon had finished praying all this prayer and supplication to Yahweh, he arose from before Yahweh's altar, from kneeling on his knees with his hands spread out toward heaven. He stood and blessed all the assembly of Israel with a loud voice, saying, Blessed be Yahweh, who has given rest to his people Israel, according to all that he promised. There has not failed one word of all his good promise, which he promised by Moses his servant. May Yahweh our God be with us as he was with our fathers. Let him not leave us or forsake us, that he may incline our hearts to him, to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his ordinances, which he commanded our fathers. Let these my words, with which I have made supplication before Yahweh, be near to Yahweh our God day and night, that he may maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel, as every day requires, that all the peoples of the earth may know that Yahweh himself is God. There is no one else. Let your heart therefore be perfect with Yahweh our God, to walk in his statutes and to keep his commandments, as it is today. The king and all Israel with him offered sacrifice before Yahweh. Solomon offered for the sacrifice of peace offerings, which he offered to Yahweh, 22,000 head of cattle and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated Yahweh's house. The same day the king made the middle of the court holy that was before Yahweh's house, for there he offered the burnt offering, the meal offering, and the fat of the peace offerings, because the bronze altar that was before Yahweh was too little to receive the burnt offering, the meal offering, and the fat of the peace offerings. So Solomon held the feast at that time, and all Israel with him, a great assembly, from the entrance of Hamath to the brook of Egypt, before Yahweh our God, 7 days and 7 more days, even 14 days. On the 8th day he sent the people away, and they blessed the king, and went to their tents joyful and glad in their hearts for all the goodness that Yahweh had shown to David his servant, and to Israel his people,